He was born Temüjin, a name that meant nothing. A boy with no future, that he was born into a world where loyalty was measured in blood and strength, that a world where the smallest weakness could become a death sentence. And his weakness arrived early. His father, Yasuji I, was poisoned by a rival tribe. That death did not only take a man. It took protection. It took status. It took the only safety Temüjin had ever known. The clan that should have protected him turned their backs. They abandoned his family. They left them to die on the steppe. The secret history of the Mongols describes it as a chain of betrayals. It describes hunger, cold, shame. It says, he was left without a home, without a family, without hope. A sentence that sounds like an ending. But for Temüjin, it became a beginning. What does a boy do when the world refuses to protect him? A child. No tribe, no protection. Most people would have broken. Most people would have died. Temüjin did not. He didn't just survive. He decided he would never be powerless again, that he decided he would never be humiliated again, that he decided that no one would ever be able to cast him aside, that he began building loyalty. Not by blood that be white choice, that he offered food to those who stayed, he gave titles to those who fought. He punished those who betrayed him, but he used fear and reward like two sides of the same blade. A starving child, that a decision that changed the world. He created a system, and that system would later become law. The blueprint for his empire was already being drawn in the mud and blood of his childhood. That if loyalty can be bought, what happens when it is taken by force? The steppe is ruthless, and power is never given. It is taken. How does a broken boy turn betrayal into a weapon and become unstoppable? Temüjin's greatest betrayal did not come from a stranger. It came from a friend, Jamuka, his blood brother, his partner in war, his closest ally. They shared victories, they shared dreams, they shared a future, they fought side by side. They built armies together. They became symbols of a new Mongol identity. Then the bond snapped. The world did not break in a single moment. It tore slowly, that a relationship once built on trust became poisoned by rivalry. Jamuka became a rival, not just a rival, but a threat. The secret history records their split as a rupture in the world. It says, their hearts were torn apart like a horse's hide. That image is not poetic. It is brutal. It shows how deeply betrayal cut. What kind of man turns his closest brother into an enemy? Temüjin had a choice. He could accept Jamuka's leadership. He could share power. He could become part of a coalition. But he refused. His hidden motive was not just ambition. It was humiliation, that he remembered being abandoned. He remembered being weak, that he remembered the moment when the world turned its back on him. He could not accept being subordinate again. Not to a friend. Not to anyone he fought. Not just for power, for his identity. For the right to exist as a ruler, not as a discarded child at a battlefield. Two brothers. The silence before the first arrow. This war was not a battle. It was a test of whether he could become more than a boy from nowhere. The risk was immense. He could lose everything. His life, his followers, his dream. But he won. And his victory forced the Mongol tribes to choose a side. To choose a leader. To choose the future, that if a man could betray his brother, what will he do to the world? Temüjin began building his empire not as a coalition, but as a machine. What happens when your closest ally becomes your deadliest enemy? In 1206, the Kurultai assembled a gathering of Mongol tribes, at a moment that would change history, that a moment when scattered clans were forced to decide whether they would remain fractured or become one unstoppable force. They chose a leader. They declared him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. It was not just a title. It was a new world order. The old rules were gone. The old loyalties were replaced. The Mongol tribes were no longer a loose collection of clans. They were a state. He did not inherit power. He seized it. He legitimized it. He turned a chaotic world into a system. The secret history shows the tribes accepting him. It says, the people bowed, not to a man, but to a law. This was not devotion. It was submission, and submission was the new currency. What happens when people stop worshiping gods and start worshiping power? He introduced a code, that a law to the system, the yasa. It was brutal. It was strict. It was absolute. It demanded obedience. It demanded order. It demanded unity. But it worked that he rewarded merit. He punished betrayal, that he replaced blood ties with discipline. He turned his army into a machine, each soldier a gear, each commander a master. The paradox is clear. The same man who burned cities also built order. The same man who massacred enemies also protected his own people. The same man who inspired fear also inspired loyalty to a silent assembly. Hundreds of tribes point one voice rising above all. The Mongol Empire was born, not as a tribal alliance, as a state, not a machine that could move across continents. But power creates enemies, and enemies create paranoia. If fear can build an empire, what will fear destroy? Will this new order hold, or will it collapse under its own brutality? The Khwarezm Shah sent a message, or rather, he sent a trap. He executed Genghis Khan's envoys, a violation of every law of diplomacy, a direct insult to the Mongol leader. In medieval politics, envoys were sacred. They were meant to be untouchable. They were the bridge between kingdoms. To kill them was not only war, it was a declaration of contempt. The Jami al-Tawarik records this moment as the spark that ignited one of history's deadliest campaigns. It says, "The sky darkened with smoke, and the earth drank the blood of cities." That is not exaggeration. It is a warning. Can a single insult destroy a civilization? Genghis Khan had a choice. He could forgive. He could negotiate. He could withdraw. Instead, he chose revenge. The Mongols did not just attack. They annihilated. They turned cities into ruins. They turned streets into rivers of fire. Cities fell. Bokhara, Samarkand, and countless others. But the Mongols were not just brutal. They were strategic. They understood that terror could be used as a weapon. And weapons can end wars without a single arrow fired. They offered surrender. They offered mercy. They offered a way out. Those who resisted were destroyed. Those who surrendered were spared. A city gate, a trembling ruler, a decision that decides thousands of lives. Fear became a weapon, and it worked. The empire expanded faster than anyone expected. The world began to change. The Mongol machine was no longer a force of the steppe. It was a force of history. If terror can end war, why does it still feel like war itself? Can one act of disrespect truly unleash a world-ending storm? Genghis Khan's life ended in mystery. The secret history hints at death during war. Other sources claim illness. Some claim a fall from a horse. No one knows the true moment. No one knows the true cause. His death was not recorded like a king's. It was hidden. It was erased. He was buried in an unmarked grave. His tomb remains lost. His body erased. His legacy, however, was not erased. The empire survived. His sons continued the conquest. His system endured. His laws endured. His fear endured. And the paradox continued. The man who killed millions also built the infrastructure that allowed trade to flourish. The man who destroyed cities also protected merchants. The man who used terror also created order. The secret history records this chilling line. Even in death, his shadow ruled. This is not metaphor. It is reality. His fear outlived him. How can a dead man still control the living? The twist is this. The greatest weapon of Genghis Khan was not his sword. It was his system, his law, his ability to create fear so powerful that it prevented wars. Many cities surrendered before a single arrow was fired. They surrendered because the Mongols were known for brutality. But that brutality was a tool, not a tool used to avoid destruction. The Mongols did not always fight. They often won without battle. They won by becoming the nightmare enemies did not want to face. A city surrendering without a fight. The quiet before the storm that never comes. And that is the hidden truth. Genghis Khan was not just a conqueror. He was a strategist of fear. A man who understood that power is not only about violence. It is about control. If fear can keep an empire alive, what will happen when the fear fades? Without its creator, can the Mongol Empire survive, or will it crumble? Here is the final twist. The world remembers him as a monster. A man who destroyed cities and massacred populations. A man who made fear a religion. But the empire he built changed history. It connected east and west. It spread ideas. It created trade routes. It moved people and knowledge across continents. The Mongol Empire was not simply a series of conquests. It was a new global system. It made the Silk Road safer. It allowed merchants to travel with less fear. It forced cultures to collide and merge. It forced distant worlds to interact. He did not just destroy the world. He reshaped it. He remade it into a place where information traveled faster than armies, where trade could thrive, where cities could grow again. The secret history states, his empire was like the sky, vast, unending, and cold. This isn't praise. It's fear. A world under a single shadow. If his empire became the sky itself, who could ever escape it? The terrifying part is this. The Mongol Empire was not the end of his story. It was the beginning, because the system he built outlived him, and the fear he created became the foundation of order. His empire became a new world order, a structure built on terror, but also on stability, on discipline, on law. The paradox is not only that he was a killer who built order. The paradox is that the order he built was maintained through fear, and that fear prevented even more chaos. A world united by terror, a silence deeper than death. So the real question is not whether he was evil. The real question is, did the world become safer because of him? Or did it become safer because it learned to fear him? If fear can prevent war, is it peace or just the absence of resistance? The Mongol Empire continued, not because it was loved, not because it was welcomed, but because it was feared. The fear was not random. It was engineered. It was deliberate. It was a weapon designed to prevent rebellion and resistance. Cities surrendered because they knew what resistance meant. They knew what happened when a ruler defied the Mongol machine. They knew what happened when a messenger was killed. They knew the price of disrespect. And so, the empire expanded without endless war. The Mongols used terror as a tool to save resources, to save lives, to save time. The paradox becomes sharper. The same man who massacred millions also avoided countless battles. The same man who burned cities also protected trade routes. The same man who inspired horror also inspired stability. This is the twist. Genghis Khan's greatest innovation was not conquest. It was deterrence. It was the ability to make the world obey without fighting, to make enemies surrender before the first arrow flew. The secret history records this warning. His name was a whip that cracked across the earth. A whip does not need to strike to be effective. It only needs to be feared. If the whip never strikes, how many lives were saved by fear? The Mongol Empire did not survive because it was merciful. It survived because it was efficient, because it was structured, because it was terrifying. And this terror became the foundation of a new world. A world where East and West could finally meet. A world where ideas moved faster than armies. A world that was both built and haunted by the same man. A quiet road across continents. A silent empire built on the thread of violence. So the real truth is not whether he was a monster. It is whether the world needed a monster to become stable. A monster who built order through fear. A monster who made the world safer by making it afraid. If fear is the price of peace, who is paying it now? If a ruler can build order through terror, is that order worth the cost? This question is not rhetorical. It is not philosophical. It is historical. It is the central dilemma of Genghis Khan's legacy. He was a man who rose from abandonment, from hunger, from shame. He became the most feared leader in human history. He turned personal trauma into a system of control. He turned fear into law. He created a world where loyalty was earned, not inherited, where merit mattered more than lineage, where discipline replaced chaos, where trade flourished under the shadow of the bow. He created a world where cities could grow, but only if they obeyed, where merchants could travel, but only if they paid tribute, where peace was bought with fear. The secret history records his final warning. When he dies, the world will tremble. It did, not because his body was gone, because his system remained. And that is the terrifying truth. The world was not freed from him. It was forced to live inside the empire he built. If his fear survived him, what does that say about our own world? The same man who caused so much suffering also laid the foundations for a new global era, a world that would never be the same again. So we are left with a moral question that still haunts us today. Can order built on terror ever be justified? Can stability created through violence ever be considered progress? Or is the true cost of such order simply too high? History does not give easy answers. It only gives consequences. And Genghis Khan's consequence was an empire. An empire built from blood. An empire built from fear. An empire that shaped the world forever. If fear can build a world, can it ever build a future? If a ruler can build order through terror, is that order worth the cost? So what do you think? Was Genghis Khan a ruthless destroyer or a ruler who built order through fear? Comment below where you're watching from. If you want more dark, true history like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More stories coming soon.